The Finnish War, fought between 1808 and 1809, was a significant conflict in the Napoleonic era, with profound implications for the region. It was part of a larger confrontation between the Russian Empire and the Kingdom of Sweden, set against the backdrop of the Napoleonic Wars that ravaged Europe in the early 19th century. The war ultimately led to the cession of Finland by Sweden to Russia, marking a crucial turning point in the history of both Finland and the Nordic region. At the dawn of the 19th century, Europe was embroiled in a series of conflicts largely driven by the ambitions of Napoleon Bonaparte, the French military leader who sought to dominate the continent. Sweden, under King Gustav, was one of the few countries that maintained a staunchly anti-Napoleonic stance. Sweden had already lost significant territories in previous conflicts, and its involvement in the Third and Fourth coalitions against France had not gone well. By 1807, Sweden was isolated, with its former allies either defeated or having made peace with Napoleon. The Treaty of Tilsit, signed in July 1807 between Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I of Russia, marked a critical moment in European diplomacy. It effectively divided Europe into spheres of influence, with Russia gaining a free hand in Finland as part of its agreement with France. Sweden's continued resistance against Napoleonic France, coupled with its strategic position in the Baltic Sea, made it a target for both Russia and France. Napoleon pressured Tsar Alexander I to force Sweden into joining the continental system, a blockade against British trade, which Sweden refused. In February 1808, Russian forces, without a formal declaration of war, crossed the border into Swedish Finland, initiating the conflict. The invasion caught the Swedish government and military unprepared. Sweden's military strategy, which had long relied on a defensive posture centered around fortifications and the difficult terrain of Finland, was quickly proven inadequate in the face of a well-coordinated Russian offensive. The Russian army, under the command of General Friedrich Wilhelm von Buxtehude, swiftly advanced into Finland. The initial stages of the campaign saw the Russians capture several key locations, including the city of Helsinki, with relative ease. The Swedish forces, under the command of Wilhelm Moritz Klingspor, were forced to retreat northwards. Klingspor's strategy, known as the perpetual retreat, was to conduct a fighting withdrawal, avoiding direct confrontation with the larger Russian forces while waiting for reinforcements from Sweden. However, this strategy demoralized the Finnish troops and population, who saw their lands occupied without significant resistance. One of the pivotal battles of the war occurred at the village of Sikajoki on April 18, 1808. Despite being outnumbered, the Swedish-Finnish forces managed to win a significant victory against the Russians, boosting morale and temporarily halting the Russian advance. However, the overall strategic situation remained dire for Sweden. The harsh winter of 1808 to 1809 compounded the difficulties faced by both armies. The Finnish countryside, with its dense forests, numerous lakes, and severe climate, made large-scale military operations challenging. Both the Swedish and Russian armies suffered from supply shortages, disease, and the harsh conditions. The local Finnish population also endured great hardships, as the war brought widespread devastation and suffering. By the beginning of 1809, the Russian forces had secured control over most of Finland. The Swedish government, under increasing pressure from both military defeats and domestic unrest, faced a critical situation. The political situation in Sweden became increasingly unstable, leading to the deposition of King Gustav IV Adolf in March 1809. He was replaced by his uncle, Charles XIII, who immediately sought to negotiate peace with Russia. The political upheaval in Sweden underscored the severity of the crisis and the profound impact of the war on Swedish society. The war came to an end with the signing of the Treaty of Frederikshamn on September 17, 1809. Under the terms of the treaty, Sweden ceded Finland and the Åland Islands to Russia. This marked the end of Sweden's centuries-long rule over Finland, which had been a part of the Swedish realm since the Middle Ages. Finland was subsequently established as an autonomous Grand Duchy under Russian sovereignty, a status it would retain until its declaration of independence in 1917. The loss of Finland was a devastating blow to Sweden, both strategically and emotionally. It marked the end of Sweden's status as a major power in Northern Europe and shifted the balance of power in the region decisively in favor of Russia. For Finland, the war and its aftermath were equally transformative. Under Swedish rule, Finland had been a relatively peripheral part of the kingdom, with little autonomy. However, as a Grand Duchy under Russia, Finland gained a significant degree of self-governance. Tsar Alexander I granted Finland its own government, legal system, and even allowed it to retain its Lutheran faith, which distinguished it from the Orthodox Russian Empire. This period of autonomy laid the groundwork for the development of a distinct Finnish national identity and, eventually, the push for full independence in the early 20th century. The Finnish War also had broader implications for the geopolitical landscape of Europe. It marked the beginning of a new era in the history of the Baltic region, with Russia emerging as the dominant power. The war also highlighted the declining influence of Sweden, which would henceforth focus more on internal development and neutrality in European conflicts. The war is also remembered for its cultural impact. It inspired the Finnish national poet Johan Ludvig Ruberg, whose epic poem, The Tales of Ensign Ståhl, became a cornerstone of Finnish literature and national consciousness. The poem, which portrays the heroism and suffering of the Finnish people during the war, played a significant role in shaping Finnish national identity. In conclusion, the Finnish War of 1808 to 1809 was a conflict of immense significance for the history of Finland, Sweden, and Russia. It was a war shaped by the larger Napoleonic conflicts that engulfed Europe, but its outcomes were deeply local, affecting the lives and futures of the people in the Nordic region. The war ended centuries of Swedish rule over Finland, leading to its incorporation into the Russian Empire as an autonomous Grand Duchy. This shift had lasting consequences, setting Finland on a path toward eventual independence and altering the balance of power in Northern Europe. The war is remembered not only for its military and political outcomes, but also for its impact on the cultural and national identities of the Finnish people.